Located in southern Fremont County, Hamburg, Iowa looks like a normal community. But 5 years ago, the swollen Missouri River devoured a good portion of this town and others in KMA land in the great floods of 2019. Today, KMA News begins the first of a three-part series of reports looking back at the devastating flooding of 2019 and how the city of Hamburg has rebounded from that disaster 5 years ago. Part 1 looks at the flooding itself and the extent of the damage it caused on the city of Hamburg. Very few portions of Hamburg were untouched by the flooding. Hamburg Mayor Harry Adams was a private citizen in 2019. Prior to that fateful St. Patrick's Day weekend, residents hoped the flooding wouldn't be severe.
There was apprehension, but not panic, I would say, in the 2 or 3 days leading up to this. Then, when Mike Crasilius came down from Sydney and informed us that the floodwaters were on their way, then the emergency plan was set in place by Kathy Crane, the mayor. Number one priority was to get elderly, infirm people, from their homes, those that maybe couldn't help themselves, get them out from the south end of town where the deepest waters were projected, of course. Then after that, it was a matter of trying to preserve homes and businesses to the extent that that could be done.
Massive flooding consumed all but the city's northern section.
All of this purple area was deep, deep water. And this south end of town, this is Highway 333, to give it a point of orientation. And you can see that the heavy waters down in here and up towards the north and east side of town. There were HESCO barriers, 4 feet high barriers, all along this street from the school out to the National River. And the HESCO barriers were 4 feet high, approximately, and the water was at the top of those before one of them broke away at the east end of town. So we're talking about 4 foot of water right here.
One by one, floodwaters knocked down some of the important structures in Hamburg, like dominoes. For example, this is the city's water plant. This was knocked out by the floodwaters when it inundated the levees south of town and put the city in a dire situation. Also victimized, Hamburg's fire station and its fire truck swamped by water, forcing city officials to act.
When the floodwaters did come in from the south end of town, electricity had to be shut off, and water supply, soon dwindled, drinking water, bathing water, and that sort of thing. So ultimately, a special process was set up by Dan Sturm, a local fire chief, and volunteer firemen to bring water in from elsewhere, pump it into our water tower so that it could feed houses in Hamburg, those that weren't underwater.
Hamburg City Councilman Mike Stenzel's family rents farmland west of Hamburg. Stenzel's land was among the many farms swallowed by floodwaters in 2019.
Our farmland that we farm is a rented farm west of Hamburg, where the break was, and it put 375,000 tons of sand on that farm. Luckily, the Corps came in and took it all back off, except for a few spots, and we're trying to regenerate or rejuvenate that farm to where production was before the flood, and it's going to take a couple, 3 more years to do that. And all of these marks here and here, and I assume here too, were all breaches.
Yep.
But there were a lot of other little breaches that were down in this area that they didn't put on there.
Stenzel says the breached levees made for a disaster of epic proportions.
It was devastating. People didn't know what to do, and the people here in the city hall were on top of everything. Alan Doval and Kent Benefal both were top dogs in getting the rescue people in here and filling sandbags and filling HESCO bags and getting everything done that needed to be done to protect the city. They put HESCO bags along E Street, which is coming into town on 333, and then they went clear to the old schoolhouse, which is up on Argyle Street. and there were Haskell bags all along there. So anything south of there was going to get flooded. I mean, because it was a lot lower.
You've been in this area for the previous floods, 1952, 1993 comes to mind, 2011. Given all of these floods, how would you compare 2019 with the other floods that you experienced while living around here?
Most devastating. It's the most devastating flood we've ever had because it was so much water. I mean, the water volume that we had to deal with here has been overwhelming to everybody. We've never seen a 500-year flood, which is supposedly that's what this one was. And so, yeah, it's been very, very hurtful, and not knowing from the core just exactly what we were dealing with.
In part two, we'll look back at how the city has recovered in terms of businesses and housing development and some of the remnants of that flooding that still remind the community of what it experienced 5 years ago. For KMA News, I'm Mike Peterson.